Welcome back to the Long Take Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Subchakta Bankard, and I'm here with my friends, Antonio Elefano and PT McNiff. If you tuned into our predictions episodes, you'll recall they did an amazing job breaking down the above the line and below the line categories. Today we're having our own Oscars party, after party. It is a couple of days later. So it's a delayed Oscars party. But we're going to be giving you our reactions to who won. We're going to talk about how we did on our own predictions and sort of look to the future, consider what implications or lessons learned we can kind of take away from this year's Oscars. How are you doing, Antonio and PT?
Doing great. I think overall I'm pretty happy with both the ceremony and the winners, which is not normally the feeling. 2 days after
you're like, this is a weird sensation.
I know. So, I feel good. How about you, PT?
Similarly, I feel good. There's some things on the margins. There's some, we got some nits to pick. I'm sure we'll get into, but yeah, I mean, it was, this was a big, it felt like a rebound, in happiness, at least.
Yeah. I'm glad. Yeah. Good vibes only here. So yeah, I think most post Oscars podcasts that I listen to, they offer the typical thing to start with is to talk about the telecast and talk about the Oscars as a show. What usually happens when I listen to those, though, is I get really impatient for them to just talk about the winners. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a section set aside for us to talk about, like, how is this as a TV show and as like a thing to watch it in your house. So yeah, we'll save all that stuff for the end. But I just want to get into kind of like the who won and how did everything pan out. So, which you've already kind of got to start on. So we'll start with PT. How did you feel about the winners? You mentioned happiness. Do you feel like the Academy got it right? What are you mentioned nitpicking? Like what are the nits to pick?
It is frustrating how easy it is to go straight to what are the problems that we want to get rushed to that. But I mean, I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once. I was excited that a big chunks of the show was every award, every category in quick succession. That was great, and a historical amount of dominance from that one movie. I guess main nit that I have would be all these great movies that didn't get anything and are left without recognition, though. They kind of get that chip on their shoulder going forward, the Citizen Kane 2001, et cetera, of like, and the Academy didn't even get it at the time. Your Banshees, your Tar, those are the two that really stand out.
It's four films, I believe, got totally shut out, right? I think it was Tar, Banshees, Elvis. 4 that people thought would have a chance, but yeah.
It was, here's a list. This list is tough. It's Living, Triangle of Sadness, The Batman, Babylon, Tar, Elvis, The Fabelmans, and The Banshees of Inisherin. All had multiple nominations, but left with nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a good list.
Four best, I think I was thinking best picture nominees, probably.
Correct. Sorry.
Right, and I forgot about Fabelmans. No, you're good. That was a great comprehensive list. All right. Antonio, how are you feeling?
I mean, I feel for the most part good about like the winners. I think that a ceremony that passes where you don't feel like there was like an egregious choice is pretty good, right? And I think I think I already knew that it was going to be an okay day because the nominees were pretty strong, right? So there weren't a lot of like terrible choices out there, right? So yeah, my personal favorite didn't win every category, but again, I didn't walk away. We're going to talk about favorite win and least favorite win. My least favorite win did happen in one of the major categories, but even that, I don't feel that terrible.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Even the ones where it's like, that's not what I would have picked. I wasn't upset about anything necessarily. Mm-hmm. I think probably my least favorite win was All Quiet winning score. Just because I really liked Babylon's score, even though I wouldn't have picked it Babylon for much else, probably. But that was the one I was like, oh, really? Like, and then I think because All Quiet won so much, we kept hearing the blah, 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 like over and over and over again. And by the time we got to score, I was just like, no, like, please don't, this can't win.
It's funny that there's and I don't want to creep into the telecast portion of the conversation, but the experience of watching it when I have full faith and confidence in the good people of Price Waterhouse and the Academy that they don't know what it's going to be. But, the arc of the very beginning of the show, oh, this is an Everything Everywhere romp. Then there was this like extended period of all quiet creeping with that music lurking, and it really felt like it was all the dominoes fell for the upset until we got to screenplay, and then it was the line held, as it were. The hill was not taken, and it went back to Everything Everywhere being being on the run.
Yeah, I think that any suspicion that the Academy knew ahead of time who the winners would be was totally displaced the year that they moved Best Actor to the end, the Chadwick Boseman year. Remember that? And so
that was the first post-COVID in-person one.
Yeah, that was the Union Station one, right? And so it was supposed to be this very emotional ending, and Anthony Hopkins wasn't even there. So I agree that it just, the way that it worked out, it did sort of feel that way. But even at that moment, I was just like, it's not going to happen. It'll swing back. So my least favorite win, if we're gonna start with that, was Brendan Fraser in The Whale. Not because I dislike Brendan Fraser or dislike the narrative or begrudge him like his win. It was just my least favorite performance of those 5. So that was the only thing. And again, if that's the one that I'm calling the least, because normally that's a long list. And there are a lot fighting, like that's pretty good. Even my least favorite winner, I was happy to see him as a person, win that award. He
genuinely seemed surprised and overwhelmed, which was really nice to see, that he just kind of was like, I don't even know what to say up here. Like those are the great Oscar speech moments where people just are so overcome with emotion, or they are so surprised that they kind of like say something weird off the handle. Right. So I think he did do his typical thing of like trying to create some metaphor for what which I couldn't totally follow. Right. It was like some weird nautical metaphor where it started with a whale and then there was a boat, and like, I don't know. It was like, it kind of got off the rails a little bit, but the look on his face, I thought was like, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm happy for him. He is an actor because of his story. Like this feels good, even though like Antonio texted our group chat, The Whale now has 2 Oscars. And that really puts it in perspective, because it's like, would I have really, and like, we just talked about a bunch of films that I think all of us loved, have no Oscars.
Yeah.
And so that becomes really weird, right? Where it's like, okay, this movie that people were either like mediocre to not liking, and has 2 because of Brendan Fraser and makeup and hairstyling, and something like Tar walks away empty-handed.
Yeah. Also, I mean, this does follow with what we were talking about earlier about the correlation between makeup and actor. I think it's silly that this continues to be a correlation, right? Like, yes, they had to transform themselves, but like, I hope that that's not a trend that we can continue to talk about, because during makeup, I remember in the group chat, I was like, uh-oh.
Yes, it's happening. So I want to take credit. I was right in predicting that the 2 would be the same, like from the same film. I put my bet on the wrong horse, the wrong pairing in that way, and then lost. PT, what was your least favorite win, since we're on the subject?
It's hard for the answer to not be Best Actor with love for Brendan Fraser, because his narrative and his story is wonderful. I have, as said on an earlier podcast, I have no interest in seeing The Whale. I didn't see it. I'm not going to see it. I've not heard anyone say, I recommend it outside of the checking the box for the Oscars that you got to see it. Except I guess for the Academy, who gave it 2 Oscars. It's the only movie besides Everything Everywhere and All Quiet that won more than 1 Oscar this year. So it's the 3rd best movie apparently. So that's tough to not say that in the interest of Splitting it up. This isn't the worst win, but if I could change one win, and I don't want to take anything away from Everything Everywhere because that's hard, but it did win so many. I kind of would like anyone else in original screenplay to have gotten it. Tar, Banshees, Fabelmans, Triangle of Sadness. I mean, if any of those had won, I wouldn't have been like incredibly mad, especially Banshees or Tar. I would have loved for them to get one and for them to have that screenplay. I feel like, there's this list of movies that, felt underappreciated in a ceremony, but gets that screenplay nod. And 10, 20 years later, people are like, yeah, that's a great movie. So, again, I don't want to call it least favorite. I'm going to say it's the one I would change.
No, I hear you. And I think that one I had predicted for Banshees for so long because of this logic of, well, Everything Everywhere is going to clean up everywhere else. So that this is the good place to give credit to a movie. I used to make fun of the spread the wealth logic. This year, I get it. I'm like, oh, it's so amazing that Everything Everywhere had such a big night. But then when we look at the list of the movies that didn't get anything, it seems a little sad. My other least favorite win, I have really mixed feelings. Maybe this is not least favorite win, but it's most conflicted win is Jamie Lee Curtis, because the more I think about that, and I was it's a roller coaster of emotions, because on the one hand, I predicted it correctly. So I was very happy about that. Right. That was one of the moments where I was like, hands in the air, like yelling at my TV. I did it. Right. I got it right. That didn't happen in a lot of other places, but, on the other hand, big story that's kind of going around on the internet, post Oscars is the look on Angela Bassett's face, right? And how she looks not necessarily surprised, but still disappointed, right? And this idea that like we are giving the career Oscar to Jamie Lee Curtis and not Angela Bassett, but the thing is, I love Jamie Lee Curtis. Like and especially sort of as a celebrity, like she's so fun. She brings great energy. She was a huge champion and ally to her co-stars and Everything Everywhere, and just was like a great part of that film's campaign. But at the same time, if we're just comparing those two, just the performances, I feel like Angela Bassett's performance in Wakanda Forever is just leagues ahead. Like it just has a much higher degree of difficulty and achieves more than I think Jamie Lee Curtis in Everything Everywhere specifically. And I love her in Everything Everywhere. I think she's a great addition to the film. But in terms of just isolating just the performances and comparing them to each other, I do feel like that's a little strange, because they both have the career narrative going for them. So then why is it that Jamie Lee Curtis is winning and not Angela Bassett? That said, like when I recorded with Antonio, my should win was Stephanie Hsu.
Yeah.
Because she has such an amazing range in that film, and she's doing so much and so well that, like, again, if we're just looking at all the performances, that would be my pick. But if we're doing the career Oscar thing, I'm like, why isn't Angela Bassett winning? It's not okay.
And I feel bad, because if I were going to change it, I would probably give it to Kerry Condon, and that so Banshees could win. And also because I thought that she had the best performance out of that roster. I think that just speaks to what Antonio said earlier of like, there weren't a lot of bad options on the table.
Sure.
Shall we move to favorite win then?
Yeah. What made you really happy where you were like, oh, this is what I wanted. This was great.
For me, my hands in the air went up for Sarah Polley, and Women Talking. That was a movie that was, that I was surprised at how moved I was by it. I was surprised at how excited I was to watch it from beginning to end. It's a movie that I feel really proud and really happy when I help other people discover it. When I tell people like, you should watch this movie. And a lot of people just were like, I don't know what you're talking about, because we talked about the sort of like botched, release of it. But to watch her win, I thought, because of what PT was talking about earlier and the sort of, the all quiet momentum, that it was going to maybe swing that way. But I always sort of hoped that Women Talking would ultimately, it's two very different movies, obviously. But to me, the screenplay of Women Talking was just amazing. It was just incredible. And I wish that supporting actress, which was just a wealth of, an embarrassment of riches again, could have included some of those women, in that cast. So, but I remember watching, Sarah Polley win, watching her castmates next to her how excited they were for her to win. I thought it was, and her speech was incredible. We'll talk about the telecast again later, but I thought the speeches in general were pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was the one that I love the most.
That's a good pick, because I think when we had recorded our predictions episode, I actually hadn't seen Women Talking yet, and I watched it that weekend, and I was like, oh, this definitely 100% should be winning adapted screenplay. And like, I'm really glad that I switched because it won USC Scripter and WGA, and so that was a really good last minute switch. Yeah. Also, I'm astounded that they pulled it through.
Yeah.
And I think that really speaks to the quality of the screenplay. Yeah. So yeah, very happy about that. But yeah, like Jessie Buckley, Claire Foy.
Yeah.
In any other year, I feel like they probably could have gotten in.
Yeah.
That also felt like a release strategy issue. This and combined with, I don't know if it's a permanent shift, but movies released earlier, that sort of, let's save it, like a movie's coming out December 25th in New York and LA, and go elsewhere in mid-January. It doesn't seem like the recipe for success that it used to be. And so that movie got trampled under these narratives and under movies that were available to just easily watch at home in the prime nominating season. And so it feels like that kind of, it got lost a little bit, but I'm with both of you. I'm glad it got reclaimed, or I'm glad that it got, it got this award. It sort of carved it out. I think it's hard. It's hard to not choose that as the best, sort of best win, just because it was the most, was it the most surprising? Or it was the one where maybe it had the most question marks about it, that didn't go to one of the two big favorites. So I think that's interesting. I'm going to cheat and say my favorite moment was Ke Huy Quan hugging Harrison Ford, and they only got like the back half of the hug, but they were smart enough to cut to Spielberg in the audience, and that just touched my little nerd heart. That at that moment everyone's celebrating, and his win, Kwan's win, even though maybe the most foretold of all of Everything Everywhere's wins, that was still great, because that was I believe, if I'm right, that was the first one besides animated feature, and it was just like, they were still like, what if they screw it up? What if everything goes crazy? So him winning was just sort of like, okay. His story's solidified. That's good. Even if nothing else happens for Everything Everywhere, it will be an Academy Award winning movie, and that's great.
Yeah, I think if he hadn't won, that would have really deflated the entire proceedings. I think everyone would have been like, what do we do now?
I mean, yeah, or it would have been just chaos.
Yeah.
On one level, it would have been great. As a Everything Everywhere fan, it would have been devastating.
He's on my list of favorite wins as well. He and Michelle Yeoh as a pair. Although if I had to pick one, I think I would go with Michelle Yeoh, just because that was the one I was not confident would happen, and in fact predicted that it would be Cate Blanchett. And so that was, in general, I think I was more cynical than I needed to be in making my predictions, and that makes me so happy, right? So like the Michelle Yeoh win against my prediction actually was, I didn't care that I got that one wrong, because it was so nice to see her get that moment. And I really was afraid that like Everything Everywhere would take everything except in this category, because Cate Blanchett's performance is so strong. And like, wouldn't it just be the Academy to be like, Jamie Lee Curtis wins one, but Michelle Yeoh, the star of the movie,
right,
does not. And like her win is so historic. And again, like that was another one that they, like the Harrison Ford setup, I think worked out really well. I think having Halle Berry, the only other actress to have won a lead actress Oscar in 95 years of its history or whatever it is, she's the only actress of color to have won, and now there are two of them now. So having her there to award Michelle Yeoh, right, a historic win, because she's the first Asian actress to win Best Actress. That was sweet. So if I had to pick one win, that's my favorite. That would be probably be it. Though there were a couple others that pleasantly surprised me, like Ruth Carter winning costume design, because that was a should win that I had that I didn't think would happen. And then obviously Naatu winning Best Song. made me overjoyed. But how about you, Antonio? What were your favorite wins?
So I was happy. I mean, I was happy with almost all of the wins. So with regard to Cate Blanchett, like I was rooting for her, and I predicted her. She was my should win and will win. But as the evening rolled along, I had a sort of similar experience looking at that Everything Everywhere sort of like line of actors that it would just seem wrong for all of those people to get awards and not Michelle Yeoh. So and I sort of made my peace with it, like in the course of the ceremony as the sort of steamroller started to go. So even though it wasn't the win that it wasn't my personal pick or the one that I had predicted, I was very happy with the win. And like when we talked about this earlier, I was like, look, we're going to debate about this. I thought actually we were going to have a wilder divergence in terms of who we thought would ultimately take it. But it's not a situation where I was like really unhappy to be wrong. I was like, this is a wonderful moment. And like, the other thing is like, Cate Blanchett is going to be in amazing movies for like the next 20 years. Right. Like, I'm not sure what, like, I hope Michelle Yeoh gets other opportunities too. But like, you know, I don't know, when we think about the sort of functional, like use of an Academy Award, I mean, it's a mixed bag, you know, like some actors, we don't hear from them very much after they win. But in terms of Oscar history, it was a really nice moment. So yeah.
I think that, you know, this, Antonio, what you're saying is that there wasn't really a villain in, you know, as a movie. You could try to argue All Quiet if you didn't like that movie, I guess. And you could argue The Whale, but The Whale was only going to be a villain in the spots that it ended up triumphing. But yeah, it was, you know, who was really upset about, you know, Angela Bassett versus Jamie Lee Curtis, or Cate Blanchett versus Michelle Yeoh. Like, you know, I mean, obviously everyone had the one that they wanted, like, you know, one versus the other, or the one that they thought because they, you know, based on their predictions. But I don't think anyone would have been like, this is a travesty if the other, you know, whoever won out of those. I did want to note, Jen, I apologize. I almost talked over you at one point. But I was going to say Ruth Carter. That was another surprise that I didn't think was even possible. And so that was a great win that she won. I saw, and I didn't go through the whole history to confirm it. She's the only Black woman to win more than one Oscar now. In the 95 years, across all the categories, which is pretty crazy. But that's great for her. And she gave a really nice speech. So I think that was really rewarding. And apart from a few of those pockets, production design was another place where there was, I think maybe the biggest statistical upset, based on what the odds were. But one interesting thing, not to lead the transition into, the predictions, was how predictable a lot of this was. I mean, there was some sort of like anxiety, especially over the big acting categories, but for the most part, it went chalk. Like, it was just what people thought was going to win. You know, the narratives, the counter narratives, all sort of were bouncing us around. But ultimately, it's kind of the way things looked like a few weeks ago is what played out.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would definitely agree with that, with the exception of, I think the All Quiet wins that people didn't expect at the expense of, I think, Elvis. Mm-hmm. To me, that was like the most unpredictable. Like, those craft categories that we had talked about, where we were sort of like, it's either All Quiet or Elvis, and then it, like, you know, costume design goes to Black Panther, right? And All Quiet gets production design, which is not the thing that we thought it would get, right? So yeah, I think that was the closest thing we had to kind of chaotic wins. But yeah, you're right. Otherwise, it was Everything Everywhere, cleaned up, made it big in the way that people thought and had thought for a while. But otherwise, but I think the other big surprise too was that the acting, because I think a lot of the Oscar pundits that I follow sort of split the difference between BAFTA and SAG. where they were like, well, like it can't be all, like, since they didn't have any overlap, it can't just follow one or the other. So we're just going to take a couple from column A, a couple from column B, and all of the acting wins were SAG, matched the SAG wins. So that was super interesting. But yeah, we have transitioned into our predictions and how those panned out. So let's start with the totals. How did everybody do? How many categories did you get right? Antonio, we'll start with you.
17.
Yeah, that's what I had. How do you feel about that? Is that good? Were you happy about that?
I think it's okay for a year where it felt a little bit strange and harder than normal to predict. I think that the main thing is that I missed some of like the big categories, which right, like I still had Banshees winning original screenplay. I didn't go with the flow with Yo. Right?
To be clear, everyone was like, this is really the closest race.
Yeah.
Best actress and best actor were the closest races where people were like, it really could go either way.
Yeah, and I picked Frasier even though I didn't want to. So normally I can do pretty well or a little bit better in those bigger categories. I actually followed the long take for a lot of the other categories and that helped there. So 17 out of 20 I think is okay. I think it's okay for the year.
Yeah, I'd say.
I was at 18 because I think because I had the whale still in makeup, even though for our discussion on the earlier episode, Jen, like all signs were that Elvis was moving up. But I kept it because of that should will of like I was hoping that that Elvis would take that instead of the whale. So I had that, and then my misses were actor and actress. I think I still said, no, I said Austin Butler. I still wanted Colin Farrell. And I still was sort of hoping because I was like, are they going to leave Banshees empty? I thought maybe they were going to say Colin Farrell when they were opening it. What a delusion.
I think a lot of the anonymous ballots that came out were pointing towards a Colin Farrell upset.
Which I would have loved. I think that would have been great. Again, no disrespect. I'm glad Brendan Fraser has an Oscar. And then actress, as we've said, I think we all had Cate Blanchett winning, holding on to win that. And then production design and costume design. Costume design, again, a wonderful surprise. Production design, again, I wouldn't have chosen All Quiet, or if we were going to choose All Quiet here, I would have maybe taken one away somewhere else, and not have it gotten up to 4. But yeah, I mean, the documentaries and shorts I didn't think about. I just did whatever the long take said, and I think that was 3 for 4.
Amazing. I mean, you two are part of the long take. You can't refer to the long take now as an outside source. Like you're part of the source now. But I will say that I had shout out to my friend Rosario, who's a loyal reader of the long take. He actually on social media posted that our predictions collectively helped him beat the rest of his family on Oscars night. Mm-hmm. So we can be really proud about that. I think we're helping people get one up over their loved ones in their predictions. So I think we're doing it right. So yeah, I also had 17, which is actually, I went back on Gold Derby and looked at my track record. It actually is a little bit lower than what I've done in the past few years. I've usually averaged out at 18 or 19. And so this was not a great year in terms of like accuracy for me, but still, I think considering where I messed up, I think it's still respectable. Cause I think when I look at what I didn't get right, I'm like, they're really based on the conversation before the Oscars. I don't think I really realistically could have put something different for a lot of the categories. Greg, who sends his regrets, he wanted to be here on this episode with us, but couldn't make it work. He actually won. He out of all 4 of us, so he got 19. Yeah. So it paid, like listeners, it pays to be up on the shorts.
That's true.
Because I think that was one of the places where he probably got an edge. Although he blamed me for convincing him to switch to Le Pupille when An Irish Goodbye actually won. I think that's what he originally had, and then he panic switched at the last minute. So
he posted on social media his ballot. And An Irish Goodbye had a pen mark, at the beginning of the Scantron fill-in, and then it was La Pupille instead, and it was he lamented it when the win was announced.
Yeah, so he could have had 20. He has in an alternate timeline, in a multiverse, he would have had 20 had it not been for our conversation. I think it skewed him the other way. But congrats to Greg for getting the highest score out of all of us. So in thinking about, because I mentioned a second ago where I went wrong, I don't feel too bad about. Like, I don't feel like I don't have necessarily a lot of regret. Do you two feel the same way? We'll start with PT. Were there things where you're like, oh, in retrospect, I really should have picked this other thing?
No, I don't think so. I think the narrative that is under fire, we'll put it that way, currently is the spread the wealth one. That took a hit this year. Yeah. Was that a fluke? Was that just the confluence of people just really liked this one movie, or you could say these two movies, if we include All Quiet on that. Or is this sort of a shift because the sort of one movie taking 7, 8, 9 awards was a little more prevalent like over a decade ago. We were talking, if you look in the 90s and the early 2000s, that would happen more often. But it frequently happens in a movie that gets a three or so of the above the line ones and then cleans up in craft. And the sort of, when we think of Spread the Wealth, there's like, okay, maybe there's a Dune or there's a Mad Max. That's sort of the technical award juggernaut that is taking a bunch of the awards, but not necessarily all of them, but then nothing up above. So then it feels like, oh well, we had 3, 4, maybe even 5 movies that got multiple awards. So this was sort of a return. I've got some statistics, some numbers that I'm not going to get into yet. We could talk about that maybe for going forward. But yeah, I think that's the big thing. Is it's just sort of like, I'm with you, Jen. As things sort of shook out, and I looked at all the movies I really liked that didn't get anything, I was like, oh, let's spread the wealth. I like that. But is that going to be the reality? Is that what voters are going to do? Or is this just an anomaly?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I think looking at my own scorecard, I feel like going into Oscars night, finalizing my predictions, I was really nervous about, because, Antonio, you said you stuck with Banshees for adapted screenplay. I almost was very close to doing that, because I was like, but it's getting nothing. How is that possible? And I think the spread the wealth narrative, as PT saying, has been so prominent recently that I kept being like, this can't be right. This can't be right. But I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go with it. And Banshees has fizzled enough that it will walk away with nothing. And then I wish I had sort of stuck to that more, because I think a lot of the mistakes that I ended up making were, oh, well, Elvis has to get at least one of these, right? I assumed that Elvis was going to pick up a couple below the line, and invest, I overestimated Elvis, which we will talk about, what that means later, probably. But yeah, it's just it felt really weird to be predicting major Best Picture nominees not getting anything. But yeah, Antonio, how about you?
It's the same thing with me. I felt like I was contorting to spread the wealth, to be with this sort of nagging feeling in my head that Elvis overperformed nomination wise, it's got to get something, and Banshees too. It felt wrong but I do think, to PT's point about does this indicate a change? Because you're right. In the past, there were films that did dominate nominations and then dominated wins. I tend to think this is an idiosyncratic year, that the love for Everything Everywhere All at Once was just so sort of singular, and that who knows? But to me, it's I don't know that the strategy has become an obsolete strategy. I just think that this year was just overwhelmed by the love for this particular movie.
Yeah, and that'll be a really interesting thing to watch for in the next probably 5 years or so, to be is there going to be another Everything Everywhere? Is this a thing that's happening now, or is this just so particular to this one special movie? Right. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it more, the spread the wealth is what messed me up in actress, right? Because I think part of the reason I stuck with Cate Blanchett is because what we had been talking about, Antonio, where it was like, well, Tar's going to get something and everyone's going to associate Cate Blanchett with the movie. Like she is the movie. Therefore, that's what's going to push her over the line in actress. And I think if I hadn't been so stuck on that idea and just been paying more attention to the momentum that Everything Everywhere had and that Michelle Yeoh had, that I probably would have switched over in the last week. So yeah, that burned me for sure. And I think, yeah, and then the lack of Elvis love, because so many of my predictions were based on Elvis is going to do really well. And, you know, people love biopics. They love musical biopics. Like I had so much PTSD from Bohemian Rhapsody winning so much the year that it was nominated, that I think that was really driving a lot of my choices. And that was one of the biggest surprises for me, was like, wait, Elvis went from being like I think I had predicted Everything Everywhere with the most wins, and then Elvis, and then All Quiet kind of tied for 3. I think that's what I had originally. And the fact that Elvis ended up with 0, All Quiet ends up with 4. I don't think there was a way I could have seen that coming.
Yeah. There were a bunch. I saw this online. I think it was on the Oscar race subreddit, which that's a confession of nerdiness that I have something from there. All kinds of streaks were broken. And the big one that Jen and I had talked about, but I think had also come up in your episode with Antonio, if I'm not mistaken, was editing and sound being linked. This is the first time since 2013 that they weren't the same. Editing and sound didn't line up. It's the first time since 2007 that the editing winner wasn't even nominated for sound. And, you know, so there's some of these things, you know, you mentioned it earlier, Jen, the sort of BAFTA versus SAG. This is the first time since 1998 that no actor from BAFTA won at the Oscars. It's, you know, the first time.
That's crazy.
That's the first time a supporting actress was in a movie that won for something else since 2014. That was always sort of an island, which was sort of part of the like Kerry Condon like narrative or Angela Bassett narrative when we didn't think that costume design would win. And Best Actor being this is the first time since 2010 that the Best Actor winner the movie that had the Best Actor winner wasn't nominated for Best Picture, which was a blessing for Antonio with The Whale, but you know, is another streak that is broken. And then the Poor Fabelmans also broke a couple streaks. The TIFF People's Choice winner and the Golden Globe drama winner have both won Oscars for a long time. TIFF, the Toronto Film Festival, Toronto People's Choice winner won at least one Oscar since 2012. The Golden Globe drama winner has won an Oscar since 1978. So my entire life, the Golden Globe drama winner would at least win one Oscar. And this year it didn't. And this is the first year ever that neither best musical comedy picture or best drama picture from the Globes got shut out. Like they both got shut out. No wins. That's never happened in the history of the Globes and the Oscars.
Wow. So if either of you were to go back and do something differently with your predictions, what would you have done? Probably. I'd
pick the right ones.
Well, I
would pick the ones that won. I
meant in terms of strategy, right? We've mentioned like maybe not have done as much spread the wealth. For me, for example, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was already betting pretty big on Everything Everywhere, but I didn't go full sweep. And in retrospect, I probably should have just like gone bigger, right? And been like, yes, like with the momentum, with the energy. If I'm predicting it for 6 or 5 or 6, right? I should be predicted for all 7. And I didn't do that. And so like in retrospect, that should have been a more dominant kind of narrative and influencing my my predictions. What I am happy about actually is that I ended up, because I remember PT, I was really agonizing over sound and editing.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up splitting them.
Yeah, you did.
And it worked out. So I'm really happy about that. I'm happy I didn't stick to the stat there. But shout out to Matt Neglia, who's never going to listen to this. Because he's an actual Oscar pundit, right? But he's the the head of Next Best Picture, and they, for their Patreon supporters, they had a Zoom on Oscars Eve, which I got to hop on for a little bit. And in the chat, I asked this question about being really stressed out about film and editing. And he was like, here's why I'm not stressed about it. Here's why we can split it. And I was like, okay. And that made me feel confident enough that that's what made me actually switch over and not stick to Top Gun in both. So that was really helpful. All right. So any other surprises in terms of where you were wrong or what you got right? Any other prediction related?
Oh, I forgot that this all started with you asking us a question. I had lost the question. What I would do differently, I would have believed in All Quiet a little bit more. I think that is like, and not, just because of that movie, but there was momentum in all the sort of, the craft category write-ups. It was how All Quiet was generating this momentum and had a lot of, seemed to have a lot of support, but I just didn't think it was going to carry it over. It was All Quiet and Elvis were the two most nominated, and then Babylon seemed to have, one or two corners. It was like, well, they're going to have score, or they're going to have production design, or maybe both. But it was All Quiet was marching on score. It seemed to have cinematography. Again, production design. It was theoretically in fourth in terms of the odds. What Babylon, Elvis, and Avatar were all ahead of it in terms of the odds makers. So that was a surprise. I don't know if I could have predicted it, but I guess I should have believed the All Quiet hype a little bit more. But if I did, I would have given it adapted screenplay, and I would have taken an L there. Happily.
Right. That was another one I switched after Antonio and I had talked, because it didn't do as well in the precursors that happened after we talked. So, but yeah, so that's actually another example of a narrative, a bit I should have leaned into more and committed to more, because I kept saying All Quiet's going to overperform. All Quiet's going to sneak into categories we don't expect. And I just didn't go all in on that. I just sort of went halfway. And so, yeah, this is what I've learned from this round of predictions is like, if you have a strategy, if you have a narrative that you think is going to play, then you got to stick with it and go all in. Yeah. All right. So, like, we've already started talking about this a little bit here and there, but let's take head on sort of what are the implications? Like, what are the big takeaways from this year's Oscars? Like, what is the everything everywhere sweep mean for the Academy? Like, we sort of talked about, like, maybe this is just a one-off thing, but like, how do you think this has a larger impact on Oscars in the future and on just the movie industry in the future?
I'll start with this, if that's okay. So to me, what this year shows is that critics, BAFTA, and then Guild's Oscars are like three things now. Like, they're three different things. Critics and Oscars have always been sort of like at odds, and while there's sometimes alignment in years where, like, the same actors will win everything, or like there's often a split between critics. BAFTA has traditionally been considered historically more aligned with Oscars because it is also a cross-industry award. But I think that BAFTA and the Academy have both changed their rules to or changed certain things about their voting procedure to make more exciting sort of nominees and winners. I think that BAFTA's rule changes, as I understand them, is that they now have like this sort of like panel that will decide some of the nominees now, right? And so I think that has resulted in a more diverse slate of nominations. But what the Academy has done in increasing and making more diverse its membership is that it's enabled more diverse and sort of exciting contemporary winners, right? And so when you look at this year in particular, where like all four acting categories, it's just crazy to me that there would be that much of a distinction between them. So to me, it just says like, well, now they're just different things. And now they're not necessarily all, we think of everything pre-Oscars a little bit like, well, it's predicting the Oscars, but like the critics have never cared about like predicting the Oscars, I think necessarily. BAFTA, I think, doesn't care about predicting the Oscars. It's their own sort of thing. The Golden Globes definitely cares about predicting the Oscars. Like, the Golden Globes only exist as like a party where people audition for Oscars. But I'm going to pay attention. I think in the future, I'll pay more attention to the guilds. And because I think that if if we talked, Jen, before the Writers Guild, I think, gave out their, and I think maybe I could have been convinced after Everything Everywhere won there. But again, Banshees wasn't nominated there. So
right.
So it felt like, oh, well, it wasn't nominated, so I'll just keep going. But in retrospect, that should have been the indicator that it was just going to be this historic sweep.
Mm.
And I'm kind of okay with this idea of like, all right, their own separate things. If it enables the sort of spread the wealth over multiple ceremonies and multiple, different types of award shows, because I love Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I'm kind of glad Barry Keoghan has an award for that movie, and that Carrie Condon, won. I wish Colin Farrell had won as well, right? But so that's my sort of takeaway in terms of the implications and how to look at this sort of race moving forward.
I agree with that. That's really well said. I feel like and again, this could change because, the stories can change from year to year, but the sort of slow march to inevitability may be over with that sort of, here's Brad Pitt winning 15 awards at 15 ceremonies for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like he's got, by the time you get to the Oscars, even if you've been avoiding the other things, you've seen the speech, like you've seen what he's going to say. That, maybe there's going to be, there's some more variance, and an embracing of that. And also, is there, so I guess the question is it just that it's variance? Is it that these are different entities and different pools that want different things, and are trying to act, of its own autonomy, which would be great. I think that's what we would all want. I don't want the BAFTAs to exist to try to calculate what's going to be the best, the most likely to win, at an Oscar. I would like to see it be its own thing. But is it, is that the new reality going forward? Or is it that Academy voters don't want to be told what to do or don't want to be told what the favorites are? And, the fact that, the Fabelmans was the narrative in October and November, and Banshees was the narrative in December and January. Is it that they were like, what, this other movie, I've liked it for a year and it's been fun and it makes me feel good. And it's, a movie about being kind instead of a movie about bitter, acidic, people. That's, is it just that they sort of remembered and they recalled, and turned to the movie they liked? Is it that they didn't want to be told what the narrative was? Or is it that, between this, and Coda, is it a post-COVID world of they just want movies that make them feel good?
I was going to say that as well, because as you were talking, I'm like, oh, is he going to mention Coda? So I'm glad that you went there. Because the pairing of Coda winning last year and Everything Everywhere, that is the one thing. They don't have very much in common. But the one thing they do have in common, right? That you couldn't pick two, in a lot of ways, two more different movies. But the one thing they do have in common is that they are hopeful and that they have heartwarming stories, right? They make people like PT saying, making people feel good. And so, I think that might be a historical trend where that's what people are looking for in movies, right? I hear so many people close to me that always say why does everything have to be really dark and bleak, and can't we just have things that are happy, things that can help us escape, right? Can't we, what happened to, why do we have anti-heroes now? Why is that so popular? Why can't we just have good people doing good things in stories that make us feel good, right? And I can't fault anybody for that, right? Although I do think, if we're comparing Coda to Everything Everywhere, I think Everything Everywhere is doing something. Yes, the end result is you feel good, but the path it takes to get there is, I feel a lot more complex and nuanced. And it's there's a lot of dark things in Everything Everywhere. It's just that the resolution of it is happy at the end.
Yes, and I also would say the other element that I think they share is a feeling of this is telling an underrepresented story.
Right.
You know, there's deaf families and children of deaf adults in Coda, and then the Asian American sort of immigrant narrative that, you know, is different than a white woman composer and a bunch of Irish dudes being stubborn. It's just like, yeah, no, those aren't like new stories in movies, let alone, I mean, you know, the specifics are obviously new, but like, you know, that doesn't feel like, oh, this is something, you know, that's totally different. And I do think there is, you know, part of the expanding out of the Academy, you know, this is the thing that I think that I'm sure there are people out there who think of this dismissively or even antagonistically, but, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing that they're like, oh, that's a story I don't hear. That's a story I don't know. Hopefully there are some people like that's a story I relate to. That's mine. And I'm glad to finally see it. But even people who maybe, you know, aren't, you know, are in the sort of dominant culture of various categories can say like, yeah, great. I haven't seen that. I want to reward that.
I think the other thing to take away from it in thinking about what makes Everything Everywhere unique and kind of standing on its own is this idea of it's very rooted in genre. Like, I think everyone in being anxious at making it a front runner all season, right? It's been a whole year of people being like, is this really going to do well? Like, is this really happening for Everything Everywhere? And I think part of that is because it's so rooted in a genre storytelling, right? There's a heavy sci-fi. It's about the multiverse and traveling through multiverses, right? You know, if you had just said that to me, there's a movie about the multiverse that's going to win Best Picture, I would be like, you're crazy. And then it's a movie, you know, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but also if you haven't seen it, why are you listening to us talk about it? Right. But you know, it's a movie that has a raccoon chef and has a bunch of crazy things, like really wacky, kooky things in it. Yeah, there's a raccoon chef, and they named. Yeah, I guess I won't go into more detail in case, just on the off chance someone's listening to this and they haven't seen it. Please go see Everything Everywhere. If the Oscars have not convinced you, hopefully we can. But yeah, the fact that it's such an out there movie and is kind of is more populist leaning, I feel like really is opening the door for us to be like, oh, maybe now movies like this do have a chance, right? And so my bigger question for everybody is, you know, is what we would call traditional Oscar bait a thing of the past, right? Is this some kind of seed change? PT, what do you think?
That's a good question. You know, I'm going to say no with the asterisk of I'm saying that because I think Antonio is right, or at least approaching it cautiously, that we shouldn't think of this, you know, one ceremony isn't the new trend necessarily. That you know, there's still going to be Oscar bait. People are still going to fall for it. Is what Oscar bait, how we define that, going to change? You know, is it suddenly going to be, oh, you know, some sort of like core heartwarming story surrounded by structural insanity and genre borrowing and genre bending? Is that going to become the new Oscar bait? Is there going to be, the sort of the rise of A24 that, is it going to be Ari Aster movies running away with Best Picture for the next decade? I don't know. But I don't think that, traditional movies will go away. I think the success of All Quiet certainly, punching above its weight in terms of numbers of awards and even sort of getting into upper categories. That feels very kind of traditional Oscar baity, even though I don't think it was made that way. So I don't think it's going away, but it's possible it's just going to be redefined.
Brendan Fraser in The Whale, that's an Oscar baity performance.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's a classic Oscar baity performance. So I think it's still with us. It's still with us even in the ceremony.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Even, and again, I like PT, and I think maybe PT was a bad influence on me in this way because I was about to watch The Whale and then I just didn't get to it in time. And now I probably won't, like you, probably won't watch it. Cause now I'm going to be moving on to other things. But yeah, just looking at the reels and the Oscar clips alone, I was like, yes, this is definitely like someone who makes a physical transformation just yelling, right?
Yeah.
That's like classic. That's a classic Oscar win.
Yeah.
So, but I think there is something to be said where it's like that's being isolated now to the acting categories and acting and makeup, like to specific categories as opposed to, right? The Whale didn't even get a Best Picture nomination. The Whale didn't sweep, right? And you could say the same thing for Elvis. Like Elvis did get a Best Picture nomination. That is very, and that's why I sort of bet really big in a lot of categories on Elvis, because I'm like, this is so Oscar baity. And so the fact that didn't get anything, I think indicates that maybe, to me at least, that maybe we're trending away from what classic Oscar bait is. But yeah, you're right. It's still very much present.
It's also interesting how much Elvis momentum were people who don't vote. Like it had a lot of, I think, like younger fans who were really into Austin Butler. And that there's something interesting about, it also felt like Bohemian Rhapsody had a lot of like new generation discovering this old music artist and being like, yes, good, we like this because of this movie. And that obviously did translate into Oscar success somehow. And now, was it that there was burnout because of Elvis? Did it just get overshadowed? Or was it just like how many Academy of voters are on TikTok watching fan cams of Austin Butler? Like, did it pass them by?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I put too much weight on that because I think, and Antonio was totally right, because I think when we talked about this and I was making the case for Austin Butler's really it right now, he's the it actor. He's so popular, right? Especially amongst the demographic that PT's talking about. But then you said, typically new actors, first time nominees do not win this category, right? The younger actors don't typically, they have to wait their turn. And so I think I should have listened to that more and listened less to TikTok.
I actually think that watching The Whale, even though I did not like that movie, it helped me to predict Brendan Fraser.
Okay. Yeah.
It just, I watched it and I was just like, this only exists so that to win an Oscar. And this is the kind of thing that I've seen before win Oscars. And so while I didn't like the movie, it did help to sort of shift me into just sort of accepting that was what was going to happen.
I wonder to the degree to which something like that liberated the voters to then be like, great, I'm going to vote for Everything Everywhere and all these other categories. I checked my box of good, correct, like Oscar bait win. Now I can stretch my.
Yeah. Right. So if the cast for Everything Everywhere had been different and there had been a contender in Best Actor, like, would this be a very different story? It was interesting to think about.
I thought about it too. I thought about what if he had gone instead of supporting actor, what if he'd gone up for Best Actor? He was so beloved and so popular, and the category. I do think that he belongs in supporting actor. That it feels like maybe a little bit of a stretch, even though he's the closest thing to a lead actor in that movie. But maybe, right? I mean, it could have happened.
The move is Ke Huy Quan in lead actor, James Hong in supporting actor.
Yes.
Fourth sweep.
I think
lock it down, and then everyone's happy. To dip briefly, I'm gonna pick my spot to talk about Oscar history. I assume people, you guys all heard about this. That now it's only the third movie to win 3 of the 4 acting categories. Did you guys hear the other 2?
You told us, right?
So wait. I think I got this. Streetcar Named Desire and Network.
Yes. And Antonio, you're right. I did, because I texted on our thread. But that didn't make it seem that doesn't sound like no, that's fine. That's just my little Socratic method. So it's not just me monologuing. So for those 2 movies, here, this is just to emphasize the sort of unique stature of Everything Everywhere's win and dominance. For those movies, they each had the other category. There was a nominee that didn't win. So Everything Everywhere is the first one to not lose one of the acting categories and win 3. It's also crazy the ones that lost. For Streetcar, the loss was Marlon Brando. Of all the people in it, he's the one who win. He lost to Humphrey Bogart, winning his own Oscar for the African film. Bad beat. You can't be mad. You can't be mad.
That's tough.
I mean, You can, because you're Marlon Brando, and so you never let it go. But that's fine. And then Network, the loss was Ned Beatty in one of the best supporting roles of all time, but he lost to Jason Robards in All the President's Men. Also a great performance. Can't be too mad about it. And neither Network nor Streetcar won Director of Picture, so Everything Everywhere is the only one to win 5 of the 6 if you include those, and the only one to win 6 out of 8 if you bring the screenplays in, which obviously you can only win 7 at most. So it's above the line at the sort of tippy top. Everything Everywhere's dominance is unrivaled.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Last question, then we'll move on to talking about the actual telecast. But do you feel like we're in for backlash of any kind in response to Everything Everywhere doing so well?
I hope not.
I hope not either.
I mean, I don't know what I understand if people want to spread the wealth or whatever, or people who think the movie just didn't connect with them. But I don't know, even people for whom the movie wasn't like their favorite thing of the year, I don't know how you could watch that ceremony and begrudge those wins. I mean, okay. All right. If I had to reach, maybe it's like the sort of unparalleled dominance of Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you compare that to like other films in history, right, that didn't win as many Oscars or whatever, then maybe we could say like, oh, did it really deserve all of that? But like, you know, in every given year, it's like, not only is it a movie that people feel good about, it's very much a movie of this moment, right? And as a sort of like, in the time capsule of like, you know, 2022, 2023, like I'm perfectly happy with this being a representative of this, right? Whereas certain other movies obviously I don't think age as well, right? I mean, like there's the classic like bad ones like Crash, and but like, you know, even like The Shape of Water, which I kind of liked that year, I'm like I'm never going to watch that movie again, right? Whereas Everything Everywhere All at Once, I think the thing that took me by surprise in the sort of and the sort of, you know, its movement, its inevitable march to the not inevitable march, the not at all feeling inevitable march to the Oscars was that it was a movie that I found sort of perfect when I first watched it, and then I was in this sort of weird position where I found myself like, but I want other movies to win stuff, so I was kind of rooting against it, even though like at certain points I was like, I kind of want something else to win this just for variety's sake. But what sort of turned me back around was these people who listened and read like the long take and like and who heard all the buzz about Everything Everywhere, watching it recently, like pre-Oscar. And like I had this close friend who texted me to said like, that movie made me cry, like you know, by the end of it. And I've forgotten that you know, just how touching that ending was until I saw sort of the Oscar clip with Michelle Yeoh's face and Stephanie Hsu at the end. And then I was like, okay, I'm good with this. So I don't know. I feel like there are just certain wins that I feel like if there's a backlash, then I'd be curious to see what angle of approach you take. And like there are years for like Moonlight and like Parasite. I'm like, what are you gonna say? So I hope not, and I think not, but you know, who knows? Internet's internet. Internet's gonna internet. So we'll see.
I mean, the strongest backlash I saw was noted curmudgeon Paul Schrader, writer of Taxi Driver and First Reformed and The Card Counter, who said it shows that like Hollywood's no longer celebrating itself and has gone too international and is striving to be woke, which are all wonderful code terms for I'm racist. And I don't think that there are all these movies about people who don't look like me, which is a bummer. But, you know, there's people out there valiantly defending him, saying he means All Quiet on the Western Front when he doesn't. But it's, you know, so I think there is that backlash. Racists be mad, and, you know, good. That makes me happy. Let them be upset. You know, I think that Antonio's point is right, that this had a great combination of it's weird, and it has all that weird stuff. So people who are like, it's new, it's different, it's weird. And, you know, in that way that like, you know, to go back to my first like locking in caring about Oscar stuff. Like Pulp Fiction couldn't get over that hump of like, it's weird. And it's ultra violence, the structure, blah, blah, blah. Like it lost to the sort of more traditional movie. So now the weird people get that. And then the people who are like, well, this is a story about immigrant families and the Asian American experience. But then, I talked to my parents. They're nice people in their 80s. Who do love movies, and they watch a lot of movies, and they like things that are sometimes that are out there. But I was like, I'm not even going to recommend this movie to them. Like, I don't think they're going to get it, and it's going to be thrown off. And my mom was like, that movie was great. It was a really nice movie about families. That's a really good. Good story. And it got, I knew there was only one of two possible reviews from my dad. It was either a 4-word positive review or a 2-word negative. He gave the positive one. The negative one would have been weird movie. And that would have been the negative. He gave the positive one, which was weird movie, but good. And so, I think it plays better than a lot of the sort of folks deeply steeped in it might think, because of all the surface stuff. I think the core themes and elements and subject matter come through and resonate, and that's why it won. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, the intergenerational nature of the story itself seems to be also its meta narrative, where it somehow managed to both be a reflection of, because I think Sean Fennessy on Big Picture, not in pre-Oscars coverage, but when the movie I think originally came out, or at some point earlier in the season, had said that this is to him the sign that people who grew up in a certain generation are now becoming filmmakers, and that this is very much a product of like the Daniels, right? They're mixing and remixing Wong Kar-wai and The Matrix, and right, like there's all these pop culture influences from a certain period of time that are now kind of manifesting in filmmaking. And so in that sense, it is very much like a young people's, right, or like younger generations movie. But then, as you're saying, PT, because it has this like very universal story at its core, it's managed to kind of reach beyond that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the telecast itself as a thing to watch on TV, because because I listen to so many Oscar and movie podcasts, I've heard a lot of complaining about the Oscars, especially recently, in terms of like, what are the choices that they make that like because last year they famously cut down the number of categories, and then people who are actually cinephiles and a part of the movie community were like, what are you doing? The show, we're the only ones who care about your show. Why are you taking this away from us? Right. And so like, there's this whole conversation about who is the Oscars really for? The ratings have been plummeting for many, many years now. And so like, for you, how did this fare and compare to other Oscars telecasts?
Go ahead, PT.
My feeling about how the Academy and the producers have done the Oscars is very similar to like baseball playoffs. Like, I'm a big baseball fan, and I feel like there's like been a feeling of just sort of like, we're sorry, like we know, like I know, like this isn't very popular, or you don't really like this, but like you should watch anyway, and like here's why. And so it's so this sort of like apologizing and also trying to sort of like bring in people who don't like it, and then where it's just like, why don't you just be the thing that you are, and let the people who like it, like more people will like it if they just be the Oscars, instead of trying to like be the Oscars but also kind of make fun of themselves as the Oscars, and try to be like, what if we did like an online poll and we showed The Flash during the Oscars? Would that make you happy? Like, is that something you would like? So I liked this telecast a lot because it was very stodgy and traditional. And I think that is good. I think that's what the Oscars wanted. I thought there was a good market correction in how they presented themselves. I think they really felt the blowback of that attempt to move some of the awards offline and have them just be sort of summarized. And I think they did what is a good thing to do, where they were like, they openly apologized. Like Kimmel mentioned it. They were like, we heard you. This was a bad idea. And now we're doing it again. And instead of trying to have a bunch of people come out and make jokes about how like no one cares about visual effects or whatever, they had people come out to be like, here's what visual effects do, or here's what editing does. And it was weird sometimes, in that great way that Oscar ceremonies are weird, to have like a woman and an old machine like spooling through film behind the editing presentation. But I like that they were just sort of like, hey, in case you are tuning in and you don't know what a cinematographer does, here's what happens. And here's, historical context for that. And so, I thought that was good. Again, nits to pick on the margins of the telecast, as, just like with the awards. But overall, I was pretty happy with it. I will note, as both of you know, I lost the date and made dinner plans. So I watched it on tape delay. I started watching it like an hour and a half. So I also fast forwarded through all the commercials. Highly recommended. That was a great time. I know
I was about to say this is shameful, but the idea of not having to sit through the ads is pretty appealing.
Yeah. Well, not sitting through ads. My biggest complaint was that we were forced to watch a Little Mermaid commercial during the actual series.
So
was
bad.
As shameless as it possibly could have been too, right? But beyond that, I agree with PT. I think that it moved pretty smoothly. One thing logistically that I really liked in terms of what made it go a little quicker was that we didn't have, I think in the past, we'd often have actors from the Best Picture nominees come up to introduce the clips from the pictures. And like, while it's kind of cool to see, like Jessie Buckley and Rooney Mara come up to whatever, it also takes time, right? And especially with 10 nominees, right? Mm-hmm. In the past, they've tried to do things where they like package like 3 nominees together into a thing, but often it just didn't make sense why you put these things together. So I think that was handled well. The main thing is like the speeches were good, right? I mean, like, one of the best speeches came from one of the shorts, right? The British, whatever. I don't feel comfortable, whatever, but I do feel comfortable apologizing or something. I thought that was lovely. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very listy. So, I mean, every year I feel like the Academy tells them, don't give a list. Right. Mm-hmm. And whatever, right? Like sometimes you get weird things like Brendan Fraser's, like the metaphor or whatever, but like he's trying, right? He's trying to say something interesting, and it was kind of interesting, and it felt, and also even the inevitable victories, right? It sort of proved to me that to someone who's up for an Oscar, it's never not special to win an Oscar, right? And it never feels like, well, I'm just at the end of the finish line. I'm just relieved that this is over. So for him, he seemed just as surprised as he did when he won his first award in the season. So I think overall, I have very few complaints beyond The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. So on the one hand, this a return to the familiar was very comforting, and I liked a lot what they tried to do in that sense. And then, but yeah, the ads were my one complaint, or that like the thinly veiled ads, because like I think the Warner Brothers montage of like, because like I think Antonio in our chat you had said, well, it's because there's the 100-year anniversary, but I feel like that was just an excuse, right? By the time you get to the end of the actual montage, like PT was saying, like because it ends on Ezra Miller's The Flash, a movie that they're trying to promote, it felt gross. Like, why are you sort of why are you pretending this is an anniversary celebration when in fact it's really just product placement, right? And it's even worse with the Little Mermaid one, because it's, as you said, like it's okay to release a new trailer during the commercial break.
Yeah,
that's the place it belongs, not during the ceremony. But the fact that it's airing on ABC, which is owned by Disney, and this is a Disney movie that's coming out, like that just felt really wrong. And I say that as a big Disney stan. Like it's, I give Disney plenty of my money. So like, it's not because I don't like Disney, but it still felt like a weird misappropriation of the time during the precious time we could have been spending giving some people not too many people got cut off, but like giving the people who did cut off more time to speak, right? There were a bunch of, especially if you had more than one person accepting the award, that was usually like only one person got a chance to speak. And apparently like it seemed like they didn't tell them that, or like that just didn't work out because of the timing or something like that. But Yeah, so like I would definitely have traded the Little Mermaid promo for more time for the actual awards. But yeah, that was my one complaint. I thought otherwise, yeah, I think otherwise it was good. I think Jimmy Kimmel did a fine job. He was perfectly pleasant. I think I was reading, I can't remember where it was, but there was someone's review of the ceremony was like he was the perfect in the middle, down the middle, right? Like he was neither just complacent and kind of pandering to the Academy, but at the same time, he wasn't so biting like a Ricky Gervais that people were like, get out of here. So I think it was what it needed to kind of like get back on track. And as PT was saying, sort of like own up to what it actually is, not pretend to be something else.
There was something like refreshing about like that first year of Ricky Gervais at the Golden Globes, just being like, all of you are hypocrites and whatever. It was just like cool, but like it's been done now, like it's over.
Right.
So yeah, I think Kimmel had some cutting barbs at times. He had some pretty anodyne jokes at others. I think he went to the slap well like one or two too many times in terms of the jokes, but overall, like I was surprised at how much I thought like Jimmy Kimmel did a good job. I kind of thought it was going to be a little more self-flagellating for the Academy. To jump in quickly on the kicking of the Little Mermaid trailer. I listened to the Little Gold Men podcast, the Vanity Fair Oscars podcast, their sort of post show, and they had two of their people who were there, like in the theater, and then two that were watching elsewhere. And the people in the theater were saying, like, when it would go to commercial, there was sort of like these pre-packaged things that would show on the screen that were not the commercials, but they were like interviews with nominees, and just sort of stuff to fill the time. So not going to show the commercials. The Little Mermaid trailer and the Warner Brothers 100th anniversary things were not shown. They were treated like commercials. They were instead clips of the nominees. Those were commercials. They were not part of the telecast. That was the telecast like leading into the commercial break. So that was paid advertisement, and it's crazy. Like it's crazy they did that. Especially crazy because even though I fast forwarded through the commercials, I saw there was a like 100th anniversary like celebration of Disney ad that happened of just sort of like the history of Disney that was during the middle of one of the ad breaks. And they didn't even like pretend to have that be the thing that's like pseudo part of the ceremony and then just put Little Mermaid. They just were like, here's a new movie. And everyone was mean to the new Little Mermaid. So you gotta like pay attention to it. And that was bad. It was bad. People were mean to her. But that doesn't change the fact that movie looks terrible. And And it
I have generally been disappointed by all live action Disney remakes. I don't understand why they exist other than to make money for people who will see them and not really care that they're not very good. So yeah, I'm totally with you. I will say that you mentioned the slap, which I generally don't want to give a lot of airtime to because I think it distracts from talking about the movies. But obviously it was a huge pop culture incident that will haunt us forever. But I do think they handled the presenters really well because historically you have the best actor from the previous year present to best actress and vice versa. And that was obviously going to create a sticky situation because Will Smith was not allowed to attend the Oscars for good reason. And I thought that their solve for that was very clever, where they were like, "Oh, we'll just double up and have two people, right?" And then and it felt pretty seamless in terms of like it wasn't like, "Oh, this is awkward," because like I'm just imagining Will Smith being here, and that enabled them. I thought the Jessica Chastain and Halle Berry, as I mentioned earlier, was a particularly good because Halle Berry was there to present to Michelle Yeoh. Like I thought that worked out really well in a way that made me sort of forget about the potential awkwardness.
I also like that they sort of, the pairing up of people and also the doubling up of awards. I also listened to the Big Picture post show, and they had I was not on board with their complaints. They were like there weren't enough celebrities. They rushed through too many things. There wasn't enough banter, which is interesting for people who usually complain about how long everything takes, that they wanted more filler. But I like that they were sort of here's two people, they're going to come out, they're going to present two awards. I thought that overall worked. And I thought that obviously they had to adjust for the lack of the previous year's Best Actor winner being present. But it also helped with the fact that they did. It felt a little weird in the moment, but it made sense to do supporting actor and supporting actress back to back, because that way, Troy Kotsur wasn't going to be out there alone. He had someone else he could talk to, Ariana DeBose. And I thought that worked really well, even though it did feel a little bit like, wait, what? Like we're doing both supportings already? Like it's already happening. But yeah, I thought like a lot of those little tweaks and adjustments were effective.
Do we have any thoughts and opinions on the musical performances? I think that's the one part we haven't talked about.
I thought I thought Natu Natu was excellent. I thought the other performances for songs that, in all honesty, I thought were kind of unremarkable. But I thought that the performances of them were exciting, right? So, I during Lady Gaga's performance, I was like, has there ever been a closer close-up than I am seeing right now?
It was really intense.
Yeah, it's very intense, but good for her, right? Like, I mean, like she brought something. Like, I know there was some debate as to whether she would actually be in attendance or performing or not. And I'm glad that she did. I'm a fan of, I don't know how to pronounce it, Mitski. And she wasn't there to perform. And I still don't know why. I looked it up during the ceremony, but I couldn't figure it out. But good for Stephanie Shute for filling in. And, but overall, I thought it was fine. And I'm glad that the performance I like the best one.
Yeah, for sure. I kept thinking there's no way, because if you've seen RRR or just watch the YouTube clip of Natu Natu, they speed up and slow down the frame rate, or the actual film in the scene. And to me, the thing I was most concerned about is this live performance going to fall flat because it can't compare to the version that's in the movie. Because the dance will just look different. And I was large, and I think that to a certain extent was true, but not in a way that I think undermined the live performance. I really enjoyed it and I got hyped. I actually made everyone in my house during the following commercial break. Like I just shared from my phone the YouTube video. I was like, we're all watching this right now. I don't care what you say. And I just made everyone enjoy it. And I was like, oh, this is still really great. So, yeah, I think that would be my personal pick as well. Though I think that, Rihanna did an amazing job. I was blown away. I was actually also pretty blown away by Lady Gaga, though she's performed at the Oscars several times already. And so I think it was I knew what to expect. But I think that if we're going by kind of the feel in the room in my house when everyone's watching it, people got super quiet for Lady Gaga. Like people were just kind of like, no one was chatting. Everyone was just like really honed in on what, maybe that's because the intense close up. Maybe it's just because of the strength of her performance. Maybe it's just because everybody likes Lady Gaga, but that was definitely the one that kind of had everybody stand still, where I was watching.
I agree with you both that the Natu Natu performance was the clear highlight. That was great. There's obviously something to the star power of Lady Gaga and Rihanna, and to people of a certain age, David Byrne, as well, showing up. That was great.
With hot dog fingers.
That was a great reveal. My warmish curmudgeonly take is if I was going to cut the whole award show down, I wouldn't do the songs. I was like, we don't need the songs. I don't care. I will be honest. We fast forwarded through 3 of the songs, like not the whole thing. Diane Warren got like 3 bars, and then fast forward. Lady Gaga.
After your commitment to her history, you did that really?
I didn't fast forward through her getting her honorary award in that little clip package. So good for her. But yeah, I mean, Rihanna and Lady Gaga, we didn't make it through the end. It was just like, great, you're doing fine. We did go through the other 2, but it's just like, maybe it's because, that's a future discussion maybe, is what's the deal with the history of the song category and why is it there? I kind of did a medium dive into looking at score and how score used to be like divided into drama and comedy, but it's because it was sort of like there's so many musicals. It was a musical based thing that it's like the songs feel so disconnected from the movies most of the time that it does just sort of feel like we have something else. Like, are you sick of people walking up and handing out awards? Like, here's someone singing. And it's like, are we sure there's not? Like, I would take 5 additional like montages about the movies and how movies are cool instead of 5 song performances every year.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm kind of of two minds because I do feel like it does serve like a Super Bowl halftime show sort of purpose to break it up. But I agree that like it you know, if we're cutting other things that are actually more central to the awards themselves, right, and that so that we can have time for these extended musical performances, that is an interesting question. But the one thing I will add before we wrap up, because I think we do have to wrap up now, is that there actually has been a little bit of blowback about the Naatu Naatu performance because, and I have to admit that just watching it when it was on, I did not notice this, but there actually weren't any South Indian performers, apparently. So I've seen lots of TikToks of South Indian dancers or people who are part of the South Indian community in the LA area being like, they could have hired South Indian dancers to do this and they didn't. Obviously, like, I don't know how, cause I'm not a part of that and I'm not linked into that, industry. Like or that community. Like, I don't know how true, but there were enough of them where I was like, oh, this is a thing. Like this is a thing that people are angry about. And also specifically because RRR is not actually a Bollywood film. It is a Tollywood film because was filmed in the Telugu language. And so it's not, and like, obviously, like, you know, people who don't have a lot of exposure to the Indian film industry, like, I don't begrudge anyone not knowing that, right? I only know that because I'm a movie nerd who looked up stuff about RRR, a movie I loved. But apparently that, you know, there's a little bit of commentary about like, why couldn't we have made more of an effort to get people who are actually part, like, you know, who either are part of the Telugu community or part of South India, or come from there, like people who are more authentically linked to the dance and the language of the film. So that is a thing that's out there that I didn't know was a thing until I started seeing it on the internet. Yeah.
Fair. That's a fair point.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to wrap up with final thoughts. Any other category? I think we did a really good job, but I think any other categories that we didn't touch on that you feel like you want to share something about, or just any sort of concluding thoughts about this award season, this year in film? We'll start with Antonio.
I thought that it was a really strong year for film. And I thought that for the most part, even the films I didn't care for quite as much, with the exception of Blonde, I think that everything had sort of something to its credit. And there was just a range of experiences when you look at the list of the top 10 Best Picture nominees that, at the end of the day, for me, this year is going to come down. There were 2 movies that like brought me to near tears, and they were Women Talking and Living. But I think that part of that was also, those were 2 movies that I saw in the theater. And if I have one regret from this movie going year, is that I didn't see some of my favorite movies in the theater. I feel like watching things in the theater, good movies become better, bad movies become worse. Like The Whale I saw in the theater too. And so like, I wish I like, cause you can't, even though I could like, it, you know, like I think Everything Everywhere I think is in theaters right now, so I could go watch it. But there's something about like discovering a movie in the theater for the first time. So I wish I could go back and watch Everything Everywhere All at Once and Tar, and some of these other, Top Gun, I didn't even watch in the theater either, right? That definitely, I think, so I recognize that those are really excellent movies. The Tar was the movie that I think impressed me the most, the one that I feel like made me think the most, and the one that I could see myself again watching like 10 years from now and just being like, how did they do that, right? And as sad as I was for Kate Blanchett, not that sad for Kate Blanchett. Kate Blanchett's gonna be fine. I also felt for Todd Field, like they had some close-ups of him too. And you know, when I watching the Daniels win like so many awards, I was like, can we give one of them to this guy? But at the end of the day, I'm gonna end where everything sort of ended at the Oscars, which is that the most complete movie to me, the movie that like mixed all of these features that I love about film, and it felt like this sort of just complete experience where like I wouldn't change anything about that movie, was Everything Everywhere All at Once. And even though I went through this weird sort of thing where I was just like, I'd like something else to win something else. But you know, at the end of the day, when I finished the ceremony, I was like, what are you doing, Antonio? Right? Like, there's so many years, like, where you're upset, like the Birdman year. I'm not a huge fan of that movie, where I was like, but you know, they picked what you liked, right? What you love, what you had as your number one movie. Like, how often is that ever going to align? So just like enjoy. But I guess my one thing is that it was just such a rich year for movies. And I hope that the takeaway isn't just like people going to watch that movie, but watching Women Talking and Living and Tar and some of these other things as well.
All very well said. It's very hard to follow Antonio when he says like really nice things. What I would say first, because when you were talking, it got me thinking about poor Todd Field. A couple things. One, it does feel like Angela Bassett got the sort of like, kind of a sore loser focus. Like, no one really talked about Todd Field, like, kind of frumping under his big hat. Which, again, totally understandable, as was Angela Bassett's. It's just like, it's very sad to lose. I don't know why people have to act like super gracious. Not everyone has to be Lady Gaga jumping out of her seat for Naatu before the Naatu people do. But the thing with Todd Field is he's already been through this. Like, In the Bedroom had the exact same thing happen as the sort of small movie. Everyone was like, this movie's low key the best movie. But then it loses screenplay, director, and picture to A Beautiful Mind, a movie I don't think anybody is like going to compare favorably to Everything Everywhere. That movie is sort of, lost in the mist of time. And that movie had the best actress frontrunner who got usurped by the only woman of color to win until now. So, it is interesting that he is sort of like stuck in this. His multiverse is just the same story over and over again. I agree with Antonio. The idea of sort of like getting back into the theaters was amazing. I also wish I had seen Banshees and Tar in the theater. I did see Top Gun. I did see Nope in the theater. And I think that's partially why Nope is in my top like 6 or 7 movies, because that is a great movie and played so well on the big screen. I did feel like the year was kind of top heavy, like the top 10 have my personal top 10. And I will admit, not having seen everything, there may be more things that slide in there. That has a bigger slice of the pie of sort of overall quality. Like, once I get down my list to like 15 or 16, I'm like, oh, okay. We're already here. That's fine. I think of things in sort of tiers when I have like a little running list. I could put spaces in between of like, okay, I cluster these movies together of, I kind of like all of them the same way. And since I've seen it, Everything Everywhere has been in its own tier up at the top. I've wanted other movies to try to get up there. Banshees and Tar are what's like underneath it in its tier, but I would love for them to get recognition. I hope as time goes on, people find them, revisit them, still like those movies. I think they're really strong. I think they're excellent. I'm very happy that the movie I like the most since I saw it was this dominant force.
I actually don't have that much to add, so I won't, just for the sake of it. But I will add that I almost saw Everything Everywhere online during South by Southwest when it premiered. I was super close to watching it. I was like, but South by Southwest, unlike Sundance, like they force you to kind of go all in with a very expensive pass. There's no kind of in between. They don't sell single tickets to single movies, and their catalog for movie premieres that are not documentaries is not as strong as other film festivals. So like, I ultimately was like, I'll just wait till it comes out in the theater. But I did see it I think it was the week that it came out in theaters. And I never would have imagined that we'd be here now. Like, going back to when I was sitting in the theater watching it, like, cause I loved it so much. And I was like, this is an amazing movie. I'm so glad I got to see this when it's coming out in a theater, but I never had a second thought about its Oscar chances. And so it's amazing that we're kind of like now here talking about how it like is historic and how well it did and all that sort of stuff. So that's amazing. And then the other thing I'll say kind of in concluding is that the season, like everyone's saying, like the season has been really fun because it was like sort of had, like we were saying, at once was like predictable, but then also not predictable because we just weren't certain that this sort of thing could happen. And so it's, from a prediction standpoint, it's been really fun to kind of go through the ups and downs and kind of the different phases of award seasons. So I want to end by saying thank you to both of you and to Greg, who couldn't be here, for helping me on this inaugural journey, right? Like cramming in at the end of award season, some award season coverage. But the clock has started for next season already. So be on the lookout. I'm going to be probably, hitting both of you up for maybe sort of like what we're looking forward to next year. Or just like, as the conversation, the year-long conversation starts all over again, we can do this all again. So, to wrap up, I know, Antonio, I know you're not on the grid, you're not on the internet, but is there anything, here's an opportunity, is there anything that's forthcoming from you that you want to promote or anything you want to plug?
I have, you can find me at like, Asian bakeries and dim sum restaurants. That's exclusively where you can find me.
Nice. I love it. That's also making me really hungry because we're recording right at lunchtime. PT, how about you?
I mean, I'm not that much more online than Antonio. PT McNiff, PT MCNIFF on Instagram. I believe my last post was March 2021. But you're welcome to send me a message there, and I will like Jen's content, and that's essentially what I'm doing online. But nothing beyond that. I now want to go to an Asian bakery. Maybe I'll meet Antonio there.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, thank you again, both of you. Greg couldn't be here, but I do want to plug, he just launched a new website, ioncanon.com, which will direct you to his new shiny new Substack. On there, he does have a really, really great piece on Everything Everywhere All at Once and sort of like how it fits into the larger context of multiverse storytelling, which seems very popular right now, but then also sort of like we've been talking about, like, what is the appeal of this movie? Why is this the movie of the moment? I would encourage everybody to go check that out. And until next time, thank you both. Thank you for listening. You can follow The Long Take on Substack at thelongtake.substack.com. Subscribe for free to receive reviews of films with Oscar buzz, as well as new films and series from pop franchises like Star Wars and Marvel.